All right, and we're live. Hi, folks. Some of you may recognize my voice at any rate. I'm Jeremy Henderson with the Chamber. I host our podcast, Chattanooga Works, and we're going to be doing a few of these sort of live Q&As as we're all stuck working from home. I've got Justin Groenert, the VP of Public Policy from the Chamber here, and Justin Furrow with Chambliss, the two Justins. And they're just going to take you through the new relief bill that passed the House and is about to possibly get passed into law.
Well, hello, Jeremy. Thanks for that. Justin Groenert. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy for the Chattanooga Area Chamber. I want to thank you guys for helping us get this all set up. Justin Furrow happens to be the Public Policy Chairman of the Chamber, as well as a successful attorney at Chambliss, and is going to be with us here shortly to kind of help cut through what all has been going on in the Family First Corona Response Act. To back up a little bit, obviously, this has been a rather tumultuous and turbulent time that we've all kind of been going through. Starting back on March the 6th, the federal government passed its first Corona response bill that sent about $8 billion into the market for medicines, public health measures, and overseas response to the outbreak. So you will hear phase 1, phase 2, and likely phase 3 throughout this conversation. Today we will cover mostly phase 2. Our timing is really good, actually, because the bill is being debated on the Senate floor as we speak, and likely will get passed before the end of this presentation. And Justin Furrow has alerts everywhere, so we will know exactly when that happens. To go through kind of the bill, the Family First Corona Response Act really sort of targets unemployment compensation, paid family leave, and unemployment insurance. That is really the sort of the measures that will dominate the bill that our business community is mostly interested in. And all of this is directly tied to the COVID-19 coronavirus response. So unemployment compensation, the bill allows state governments to have the flexibility with respect to waiting periods and the interpretation of able, available, and actively looking for job tests that states employed to give out unemployment compensation insurance at sort of time of tumultuousness for a lot of sectors in our economy. Paid family or paid sick leave, the bill allows for 10 additional days for private sector employers with fewer than 500 employees. The eligibility on that would be, again, 10 days. If you are subject to a government quarantine or isolation order as it pertains to the COVID-19 virus, have been advised by a health provider to self-quarantine, you are caring for an individual that is on quarantine or has been self-quarantined, or you are caring for a child whose school is closed, or the caregiver is unavailable due to the public health emergency. I think a lot of people are kind of in that boat right now. And then obviously, or you're experiencing substantially similar conditions as specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. These do also mandate that you are unable to either get your job or unable to telework, which is something that is important to note as well. You will be required, the individual would be compensated at the higher rate of their regular pay, the federal minimum wage, or a local minimum wage that will not exceed $511 a day. If you are the individual that needs to take off. If you are caring for someone that is affected, that rate is $200 a day for a max of $2,000. Again, that's that 10-day. And this is all above and beyond the normal sick time that a company provides their employees. The payment structure for businesses will be mostly through tax credits of Social Security taxes that are paid. And if a company is owed more than what their tax liability would be, they would be reimbursed by the federal government. Also, health plan expenses are covered as well for companies that are allowing for health benefits to remain in place while we're going through this crisis as well. The bill also covers paid family and medical leave. Now, this is for anyone that is employed. You have to be at least employed for 30 days. And it is mainly for childcare if schools are closed or daycare is unavailable. That will be compensated at 2/3 of the regular rate for 10 days with $200 a day cap. And there's a $10,000 aggregate on that one over the course of those 10 days. The bill also covers diagnostic testing, allowing for health plans to cover any testing for the virus at no cost to the consumer. It also has funding for health services. There's additional money, about $1 billion for school nutrition programs. There's also some medical device liabilities for anyone with respirators or anything like that. We are gearing up for a potential influx in those types of medical need areas. Justin, talk to us a little bit about what you're hearing in terms of how this is affecting your clients and companies in and around the area.
Well, thanks, Justin, the Justin and Justin show. Yeah, so clients in this area are trying to figure out what to do with staff. You have folks that don't want to come to work, that can't come to work because of childcare issues or quarantine or otherwise, or that maybe it's just they're in a vulnerable population and are not advised to go to work. But if they go home, they're either using their paid time off, they're exhausting that employer-provided benefit, or they don't have any and they're going home unpaid. And so clients are really struggling with the legal requirement of not being required to pay folks when they're on leave versus the moral and ethical requirement of, hey, if we're sending people home, if we're shutting down our facility for a couple of weeks, what are these people going to do? And you see Congress right now trying to step in and fill that gap with, as you noted, the two different forms of paid leave. You have the 10 sick days, which would cover not only COVID-related illness and care and self-isolation, but also child care. And then layering on top of that, an additional component under the Family and Medical Leave Act where they could take up to 12 work weeks of leave to care for a child whose school is closed or whose child care provider is closed and still make 2/3 of their pay. And that's 10 additional weeks. So you have the 10 days full pay under the sick leave law, and then you have 10 additional weeks.
So that's kind of where this sits. I know there's going to be a lot of questions that we will hopefully be able to answer for you. Again, the bill was passed out of the House late last week. There was a slight delay in the bill going to the Senate. There was a technical correction needed to fix some of the language. The Senate has taken it up today. In response to sort of this piece, for business owners, there's a lot of concern about what this means in terms of how to make ends meet with these sort of unfortunate and sort of through no fault of your own costs that are going to be set up. The Senate Republicans have made clear that they are working to pass a Phase 3 bill. You'll hear a lot more about this in the coming days. This is going to be more of your stimulus package to really sort of address the economic hit that this is costing not only businesses, but employees, employers, and the entire economy. The U.S. Treasury Department set out kind of a 3-phase proposal today with parameters that they're looking for in a bill. The Senate has said they will not leave Washington until they get this package through as well. That would include $200 billion for distressed sectors of the U.S. economy, $50 billion for the airlines, and then $150 billion elsewhere. There will be temporary permit use for the Exchange Stabilization Fund to guarantee money market mutual funds. There will be economic impact payments to individuals. Originally, the idea was a one-time $1,000 payment to most Americans in a direct fashion. They have said that they are looking to do 2 payments now, and it appears that they will stagger that based on income level and family need. But they are looking to start issuing roughly $500 billion again in total, $250 billion to be released on April 6th, and then a second payment of $250 billion total, coming out on May the 18th. So there will be a direct stimulus to the economy through individuals. And then there will also be a $300 billion small business interruption loan fund. And that will get to sort of the heart of how to make businesses whole as they are sort of filling in these gaps on paid leave and some other things, plus the loss of business. Obviously, restaurants, service industry is being hit really hard at this time. So those will all be covered in this phase 3 package that you will start hearing as soon as phase 2 is passed. Aside from that, the Small Business Administration is using their emergency loan program sort of in unprecedented manner. Most emergencies are sort of quarantined to one location, if you will, because it's a natural disaster of some sort. This is going to be a fairly widespread use of those funds. The federal government has injected more money into their coffers to be able to use for small business loans, low interest loans. The state is currently in the process of applying for that emergency declaration. The SBA said as soon as the state submits it within 24 hours, they would be approved to start accepting loan applications from businesses affected. So there's a lot of things coming down the pike. And again, this is one of those situations that is ever evolving. Do you have anything else you want to add to sort of phase 3 or anything else, Justin, before we open it up for questions?
No, I mean, I think where everything that I'm seeing right now is employers struggling with what to do with their employees, with how to pay for this, with how to fund it out of their own pocket. And I think that's why that's very key that they get that tax credit on their Social Security tax obligation. The bill, in my opinion, from an employment law standpoint, set aside the human element, raises a lot of questions. In terms of what does it mean when someone's unable to telework? What do they have to establish to be able to take the leave? If you think of traditional Family and Medical Leave Act principles, there's a whole documentation requirement that comes with that that's not in this bill, and it's typically left to regulations. But we're going at such, I think McConnell said, warp speed that we just don't have time to flesh out all those details. So there will be a lot of questions when you try to figure out how to implement this, and also what to do with people that don't fit neatly within those categories. If you have people that aren't sick, that don't have children at home, but nevertheless want to self-distance by staying home, how do you weave that into this where they're not technically not covered by the bill?
And again, I think to Justin's point, we are moving as quickly as the federal government knows how to move, which warp speed is not normally the process. However, I think a lot of those questions hopefully will be addressed. And a lot of the funding will actually flow through the states and local governments, which will help flush out some of those questions as well. So that's where we are sort of with the federal piece. So if you're open to any questions, Jeremy, I'd say let's start that process now.
Yeah, okay, guys. We're going to attempt to take some questions from the audience now. If you do have a question, just type it into the Q&A section, and I will supply those to the guys to answer. While we're waiting, I'll start you off with one. You guys talked about implementation. Does this go into effect immediately? There are a lot of new rules that people are going to have to comply with. Will they have to begin complying with those immediately when the bill is passed?
I mean, I think it will be retroactive to some extent, but the implementation of the law will be within 15 days. A lot of these programs are new, so the federal government's going to have to come up with specific guidelines to implement them, but they are really sort of streamlining how quickly those can be implemented at the federal level. So 15 days from the president's signature, a lot of these things will start kicking in for businesses and employees. Justin, you have anything to add?
Yeah, you raise an interesting point because the act itself right now says that it'll go into effect no later than 15 days. And so what do we do during that bridge the gap period if the president doesn't make it immediately effective upon signing, if he can even do that? what do we do during the 15-day period with folks that need to take leave, but maybe they have no paid time off and an employer can't give that leave or can't afford to give that leave because they're shut down? Might be able to if they could get the tax credit, but because the act isn't effective yet, wouldn't be able to take advantage of that. So that's a gap I see that people are going to struggle with in figuring out what to do until day one. Day one, people, assuming there's money to pay for it, people can take leave and then we can get that tax credit on the back end. But that 15-day gap period may be an issue.
Right. And I think that's part of where phase 3 will come in. A lot of the concern that was expressed is, we're doing these things. How are we going to help the employers bridge that gap? I mean, these are all companies with 500 or less employees, so larger than the usual definition of a small business. But there are a lot of companies that aren't going to be able to sort of cash flow this. So it's going to take multiple approaches for businesses and business owners to sort of help keep themselves afloat as they're sort of doing this. And I think that's where this phase 3 moving as quickly as it can will help sort of flood the market with loans and equity to help sort of fund these things on the front end, so that businesses can stay afloat as they're sort of retroactively paying it off later.
Okay, and we have our first question, pretty simple one. Someone has asked, what about furloughs?
Well, furloughs, technically what you're doing is kind of laying somebody off. You're closing the shop, laying them off and telling them not to come back for a couple of weeks. That would be a temporary layoff under Tennessee law, so would probably entitle them to unemployment compensation during that period. Unemployment compensation, I believe the maximum rate right now is about $275 a week. So that employee would probably be better served if the company can afford to do it on the front end, to have it not called a furlough and just be given leave during that 2-week period, that, the 80 hours of leave that they're entitled under the paid sick leave law, so that they can get compensated at 2/3 of their, either 100% or 2/3 of their normal rate, depending on the reason for the leave. And then the employer could get it back as a credit on the back end.
Okay. And RC asks, could you go back and explain the FMLA impact?
Yeah, I can. So right now, under current law, the FMLA allows for leave for a variety of different reasons, primarily for an employee's serious health condition or the serious health condition of a family member. What this law would do would be to expand FMLA eligibility in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, so that employees, after they've been employed for 30 days, could take leave for purposes of providing child care when they have a child whose either school or child care provider is closed or unavailable because of the pandemic. That's the only change to current FMLA law, would be to allow FMLA for child care leave. And if you're looking at it from a purely FMLA standpoint, the first 10 days of that leave could be unpaid. What employees typically do, and they're given the option of doing under this law, is substituting any paid leave that they're provided under, either under company policy or under this new paid sick leave law. They're substituting that for the first 10 days. Then the remainder of FMLA leave, up to 12 work weeks, would be paid at 2/3 of the employee's typical wage. So if you take it, you make $100 a day, you would get $67 a day FMLA leave for up to 10 work weeks.
Okay. Our next question is, will individuals need to file anything online before the aid is distributed? And what about small businesses? What needs to be filed, if anything, online?
That's a great question. This aid will come directly from employers. So you wouldn't need to file anything online with the government in order to get this. You would just need to be fall within one of the categories that Justin 1.0 mentioned earlier. And let me be clear on what those are. So to get paid sick leave, I'm separating this out from FMLA, but to get the 80 hours of paid sick leave, it either has to be for a quarantine or isolation order, an order by a healthcare provider to self-isolate, the employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is seeking a medical diagnosis, the employee is caring for an individual who's either subject to an isolation order, a quarantine order, or who is experiencing symptoms, or childcare. So if you fall in one of those categories, or if this sixth catch-all category, any other reason specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, then you would be entitled to that 80 hours of sick leave from the company. And it's paid either at 100% of your rate if it's for one of the first three, the illness, or 2/3 of your rate if it's to care for someone else or childcare. What your employer would have to do on the back end is file for the credit or have the credit applied when filing the quarterly 941 reports. And that's where you report your wages, and then you pay your payroll taxes, which would include FICA, the Social Security tax, which this is credited against.
Okay, and I just want to say real quick, I'm seeing a lot of questions from people. I think there's a little confusion about, who needs to apply for what. And as both Justins have said, what we're talking about right now is primarily phase 2 of this. Phase 3 is the phase that will apply funding. So for most individuals, the benefits they're going to get out of this, as Justin Furrow said, will come from their employer. And then I think I can hopefully promise that when phase 3 becomes more of a thing, maybe we'll do another one of these to explain how employers can apply for those benefits.
Absolutely.
Individuals don't have to apply for
absolutely. And let me be clear too, phase 3, what we just highlighted would be what the U.S. Treasury Department is sort of, and the Trump administration is laying out as priorities to Congress. No legislation has been drafted as yet. They want to get through this vote today on phase 2, have the president sign that. But I would say within short order, later this week, early next week, you will see legislative language, how some of these provisions in phase 3 that I laid out will start to look. But right now, it's too early to know how the mechanisms are all going to work. So right now, we know what's in the phase 2 package, and that's sort of what we're trying to address today. And Jeremy, and I'm not going to speak for 2.0 as he says, but I think we would be happy to jump back on another one of these to get further details, see sort of how that all plays out.
Okay, and I think you just answered this one, Justin, to some degree, but I'll ask it anyway. Will there be cash given to any small businesses, or is the entire package just realized through savings on the tax write-offs?
Right now, this package, phase 2, would just be the tax write-off. So there's no cash coming with this to small businesses. It's just through the write-off on the Social Security tax that you pay on wages.
Right. Now, there are, again, some emergency small business loans. Some of those programs are going to become available in short order. So through the Small Business Administration, these emergency loans or low interest loans that can be spread out over the course of 30 years. They've also said they are going to waive the first year of reimbursement on those loans as an added benefit. So there are going to be some programs that are currently in place that will help bridge those sort of funding gaps, if you will. Currently, about 10 states had been approved for these loans. Governor and the state have to formally request an emergency declaration from the federal government. I believe by the end of this week, Governor Lee's team should have that done. And then within 24 hours of that declaration, businesses would be eligible to apply for an emergency loan. So there are going to be some stopgap measures outside of what's in this bill that would allow you to sort of help bridge some of those funding needs. It is a loan, but it's a low interest loan from the federal government that can help you bridge some of those. So be on the lookout for more details on that as well. And we will be shooting information out through our social channels and our website as more details sort of come online.
Okay. Lauren has a question. This one might be more specific than you guys are prepared to speak to, but what are your recommendations for an event venue business that has chosen to continue to operate and host large events to avoid legal liability?
I'm going to let the lawyer handle that one. Justin, that one's all you, buddy.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So anytime you're talking about avoiding legal liability, I mean, the typical thing you think of is a waiver. So if you get anybody to come to your events to sign a waiver, that's not always practical, and we understand that. So just enforcing as much as possible the social distancing and the other hygiene measures that are being put out by the CDC and the other governmental agencies. And from a practical standpoint, you know, if you think about the transmission of COVID-19 and the things that we know and the things that we don't know, it would be very difficult for someone to be able to track back and say that they got that at your event. You know, so unless there was some sort of unique exposure that occurred during the event, you're probably okay. The best thing to do is get a waiver. That's not really feasible. So just try to enforce as much as possible the hygiene protocols, social distancing, and otherwise, so that hopefully you don't have any transmission there.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one, but I think it's important that we clearly answer it. Probably. Do we have to pay quarterly taxes and payroll taxes right now?
If the answer is do you have to, I mean, they haven't done anything to suspend the quarterly payroll taxes right now. No. So you would have to continue paying taxes as per usual. I did see that they did some moving of the deadlines and waiving of penalties and interest with respect to the April 15 deadline. I don't believe, and I haven't seen that impacted payroll tax payments any. I'm hoping for a head nod, yes or no, from one of my co-presenters. But no, so you'd still have to pay those quarterly taxes. And until this law goes into effect and you actually start providing leave under the law, you wouldn't be able to take the credit on your quarterly tax payment. So realistically, it's probably going to be in Q2 before you actually realize that credit, since we're almost the end of Q1.
Yes, and to reiterate, any changes, April 15th is still the filing deadline. They've not moved the deadline for you to file your taxes. However, if you owe money to the federal government, there is there's an automatic extension on when that is due. So that is set into place right now. I don't have further details on how that goes. I think it's any payment owed to the federal government by an individual up to $1 million, and for businesses up to $10 million, I think, is where the delay comes in. But we can research if there is more information. We'll happily Jeremy, I would say if anybody has direct, they should reach out to me and we can track down an answer. I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay, I think you were fading out a little bit there at the end, Justin.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that if there are any specific questions or any changes that we see, if anybody wants to reach out directly, feel free. My email's on the website. You can track me down and we can find you for answers.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think we're going to have time to get to every single question that's been asked here today. There is a lot of question around how companies will apply for relief, but again, I think that's going to be tied largely to phase 3, and so maybe we can get into some more detail about that whenever when we know more and do another one of these around phase 3.
Absolutely. I think phase 3 is going to be the key to answering a lot of the uncertainty that our members have. So the sooner we can get this vote done today and the president can sign phase 2, the Senate leader made it abundantly clear today that their priority is on the business owners trying to stay afloat right now and finding ways to make sure that we keep the economy as close to running as well as possible as we can through this sort of uncharted territory. And there will be a lot more information in the next week or so coming out that we'll happily keep everyone up to date on.
All right. Hopefully this has been helpful for everyone. We are definitely dedicated to helping try to keep you guys informed. It's a weird time out there right now, we know. We're going to be doing some more of these over the next weeks and months and however long this goes on for. So stay tuned here, stay tuned to our social media, our website. We'll let you know when these are coming. Thank you, Justin and Justin, both, for sharing some really valuable information with our members.
Absolutely happy to do it. And again, if there are any questions specific to you, I'm certainly no expert, but we can certainly figure out as timely an answer as we can. So feel free to email me. Our info's on the website. Update, Jeremy and the comms team are doing a great job keeping all of our information up to date on our social media feeds as well as our website. Justin Furrow, thank you very much for your expertise as always, and for being such a great chair. Thank you all for all you're doing in this sort of unprecedented time. We appreciate all that you guys are doing, and any way we can be helpful, we want to be. So,
thank you, and thank you to everyone out there. It is a tough time, and I've seen a lot of questions coming up on the side about where do we go to better explain this and for assistance. The Chamber's been great about putting out information. At risk of making a shameless plug, chamblisslaw.com, we have a bunch of legal alerts on the various versions of this bill, including the one that's about to pass that'll come down this afternoon. But look at any of your governmental websites. You'll have the Department of Labor publishing guidance. There's a lot of stuff out there. But just like Justin, we're here for you. So if you need anything, shoot me an email, let me know, and I'm happy to answer questions as I can.
All right.
thank you all very much.
Thank you.